Hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Can you? Yep. I'm good. How's my sound?
Fine.
Good. Yeah. I was trying to do it through Gmail, and I don't think that
No,
that might.
you have to do it through YouTube Live now.
Okay. Yeah. I tried calling a client the other day with it, and she was just like, "I don't know what you're doing. Can we just use
Um,
Skype?"
yeah, Hangouts on Air has become part of YouTube Live.
Right.
So you can't access it via Google Plus anymore. You have to do it through YouTube.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Just accept what they do. They seem to know what they're doing. So, yeah. How are
Yeah.
you? You said it's
I'm good.
super snowy over there.
Yeah, I mean, we got about 3 inches of snow overnight, and now it's turned into rain. So it's just messy.
Yeah. Well, where I am by the sea, it doesn't really snow, but I feel like kind of sad about that because it just gets cold without
Yeah.
the fun of the snow,
Right.
right? So anyway, um, but yeah, like it's funny that you mentioned the podcast thing because literally, like, it's just been something that I keep wanting to do,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of I don't know, it's like I've recorded a couple myself, and I'm still obviously don't know what I'm doing, still very scared about putting it out there. But your feedback, even on that recorded little thing that I did as a review for that book, I was like, oh, good. It's not terrible. But yeah, I'm just wondering what you were thinking in terms of, you said something about a network. So what were you like imagining?
Well, I'm trying to figure out a way to what does broadcasting mean in the 21st century?
Sure.
If you looked at, let's say, well, I mean, I'm not totally sure if it's a one-to-one how the BBC radio functions in the UK as opposed to, like NBC doesn't even have a radio station anymore in the US. The only I think ABC still does and CBS does. But basically, even CBS Radio, even though it's a national, it's not even a radio company. Although I'm not actually sure if CBS still owns CBS Radio. But anyway, the point is that it's a bunch of affiliates housed under one network. Still, that's like still what it is, and it's the same thing like with a podcast one or a podcast network.
Yeah.
That there are a bunch of shows under essentially a network. So like, I'm trying to think of ways that I could partner with a few different podcasts that are relatively at the same level that I am to try to, expand the reach, basically.
I think that's a great idea, and it feels like the next step. I think now that not everyone, but now that podcasts are growing and people are sort of putting them out there, it's just like with blogging, you do want to have a place where people can go and find similar shows, right? So like somebody asked me the other day, like, how do you find, because there are so many blogs, like how are you finding new blogs? And I use like syndication things. I go to BlogLovin or Feedly. You kind of go to those places, and I think that's kind of the first step as well with podcasts. Going straight to iTunes is not the best way because iTunes has its own.
You need to have if you don't have any name brand recognition, or if you're not a show that's got a lot of anticipation, iTunes only works with the algorithm being that, people are, the more you need traffic in order for people to discover it, basically.
Yeah. And I found some of my favorite podcasts through personal recommendations or from like guest interviews, like hearing somebody on somebody else's podcast. So it's like that could change. And I think the way of doing that would be having a network. And where I've seen that happen really effectively, and it obviously does work if it works for people like NPR, and who are the guys that do Radiotopia and all that stuff. But like there are lots of
NPR is actually a very, very good example of, like, NPR is the same model from the way radio would have worked in the 40s before television, but they found that they can still do it today. So it can be done.
Yeah, and the Gimlet, obviously, like Gimlet Media has kind of made a big name for themselves, but I don't think it needs to be this big like multi-budget, because all those guys, they pack a load of cash.
Yeah, and they built to that.
Yeah.
We're talking about how do you start it.
Yeah, and prioritizing the content. It doesn't need to be this big production. And I know a lot of shows, especially in the creative area, and I thought that would be a really good starting point.
I agree.
You know, I mean, it's all the stuff that I'm into, and like I assume, I don't know, we haven't like exchanged podcast recommendations. It's almost like exchanging. I don't know if you've done this with friends, but it's like exchanging book recommendations. You have no idea if somebody's going to like the same book as you. It's like often quite hit or miss, and I think it's the same with podcasts. But yeah, it's funny. But I think there is definitely some commonalities there, and that's why bringing together some of those shows, if possible, would be amazing.
Yeah, and to start, it could be simple, something as simple as a hub plus mentions on everybody's podcasts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you cycle through different ones. There could be a spreadsheet. It could be really quite simple. Yeah.
Right. Now, I should also let you in on that. Well, part of the reason why I'm interested in this is because I grew up listening in America. Before television, there was radio. Yes, obviously, that's basically common knowledge, right? But from 1962 onward, essentially all radio drama went defunct, and radio became something less about entertainment and more about, say, newscasts or music. Basically, it was either talk radio or music. But podcasts, in my opinion, have revived radio. A podcast is just a transcribed radio broadcast that you can download whenever you want on demand. So, and the reason why radio died because of television was about advertising dollars. Guys couldn't sell in anything anymore because viewership was dwindling. But now, so we're at a point in time where it seems like it's time for that to work again. And in the 1970s, now this is a tangent, so I apologize. In the 1970s, one of the most famous radio producers, his name was Hyman Brown. He was from Brooklyn, New York, in fact. He sold to CBS a radio series. He tried to revive radio. It was called the CBS Mystery Theater. It ran for a few years. But the idea that he had at the time was to put it on 7 days a week. And even though it wasn't a continuous story arc, they were each their own self-sustained stories. But the problem was you were asking basically people if they wanted to get the habit of doing this to listen 45 minutes a day, 7 days a week. Even if you didn't have to listen to every one in order to get it, you could just listen once a week. But I think that didn't work because it's the same from now. Unless you are HBO or some kind of series like that, asking people to tune in at a time doesn't work anymore. Like, you need to watch this at 9 o'clock or you're not gonna see it. People are like, So it's, from my mental approach, it's like a two-pronged approach. I have a specific idea of wanting to launch a radio drama, a specific show that I know I want to work with and relaunch. But also at the same time, I'm very interested in broadcasting and like, how do we continue to push the good things that people like you and I are doing, and how do we continue to grow them? So anyway.
Okay, hang on. So are you imagining specifically, okay, tell me more about the idea of this, like the drama.
All right, well, that is separate from this idea, but also part of the idea too.
Exactly, because anything you do, this is how I see my like multi-passionate kind of approach to business. It's like anything you do, if it raises your like I don't know, profile in one area, it's going to be easier to
do things.
Get some attention.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. No, that sounds really exciting, and it's good to have like this overall vision, because I'm approaching this like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Do you know what I mean? But I think you've got like a goal, and I think that's really important.
Well, I've also done 47 podcast episodes too, so which isn't like this. Yeah. It's not 470, but after 47, I kind of feel like, okay, I know how to do this. It's not necessarily what I'm doing, but like if somebody was like, hey, can you do a podcast? I'd be like, yeah, and here's 47 examples of why I can do a podcast.
Yeah,
so,
and it's like natural steps from that.
Yeah, so I don't really know, like, I thought of you because I listened to the the blog that you had transcribed, and it just seems like a natural progression for you to have a podcast. If you wanted one, if you didn't want one, then it's not. But
and that's what's such a coincidence is that too. I can send you the files because it'd be great to have your feedback. And
please.
It's hard for me to do that, but it would be great to have your feedback on those. That's for sure. It's just like it's going to do an introduction, like pilot 10 minutes, just explaining what it is. The next one is my first real one. Heard advice that you launch one a week. The first 3, for example, like get 3 out and then start doing it on like a weekly basis, and that's kind of the plan. I'll have a task attached. I think I can do it. But like I said, it would be good to get your feedback. My idea was get it out in January. That's cool. And who else? Like, did you have other people in mind? Because I was like, cool, but I'm wondering if you had the same ideas.
I have only done very preliminary scouting.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you also because you just happened to immediately say, yeah, let's talk this weekend. Also, I just have to do more work on it, basically. I have to look up more podcasts. But a lot of podcasts follow me on SoundCloud, so that's a good start. And in fact, in a lot of ways, SoundCloud is that kind of network, except that it's not exclusive to shows. I think some of the point of this would be how to program it so that, I don't know. This is such an
okay, so the thing for me is like, I know, for example, with Gimlet or NPR, I know that their shows are going to be of a certain standard, and more or less, maybe 60% of their shows. Whereas SoundCloud, I'm not going to like 60% of the podcast cloud.
Well, plus SoundCloud is not exclusive to podcasts too. It's more music than anything else.
That's the first thing. I associate it with music, and secondly, it's still more like a search engine. Whereas this, having a network, is more like, no, these are like hand-picked for people like us.
Yes.
That's part of it, and yeah, that really excites me. I think that could be really great. Just trying to think. I can't see a disadvantage for people wanting to get bored. Like, I guess there are a lot of logistics to kind of sort I haven't even thought of. Andy Miller's Creative Pep Talk. Yeah,
you told me about it.
Fucking big, and like my instant thought is, I know, because he's like doing his own thing anyway. But why would somebody say no? Shows are like within that niche. It's kind of, to me, it's win-win. So it'd be interesting, and I think one area of research that I'm going to try and do, especially on my Facebook group, is just what are people listening to? Because if you get another thing, again, like I said, with podcasts, just like books, it's really hard to know what people are actually into. And if things aren't the same, if something isn't hitting or we're missing something, I don't know. It's just like, I think one way of doing it is like survey your audience, find out what your people are listening to.
Well, if you look at like both the Wall Breakers and the League of Creative Introverts, there's a ton of overlap between it's basically the philosophy that we have is almost identical. How we're approaching it, but I mean by philosophy is like, you know what I'm saying, as far as like what we personally want out of life and how we think we can get there. And a lot of that is by partnering with other people, and but meaning that like if you and I both had podcasts on the same network, there would be commonality, but then individually we could go off and do our own things, but there's enough in that Venn diagram in the center where like, even if let's say there was a comedy podcast, but it was all about, like I can think of this one podcast, I don't listen to it, but it runs on a lot of the wrestling networks, and it's by a wrestling fan, and it was called Wrestling with Depression. And it was about this guy who was a wrestling fan, but he also grew up with all this depression in his life. And it just somehow worked in conjunction with some of these other wrestling, like interviewed people who are in wrestling podcasts. Because he would interview people, sometimes wrestlers, you know, like.
Yeah. And that's the thing about podcasts. It's not like it's a really clean cut, like genre thing. Because, for example, like when I look at my podcast that I'm into, it's like a totally bizarre mix. And I think everyone's like that. It's not like, oh, I only listen to podcasts about creativity. Like, that's just not true. So it would be about getting a mix, but it's like when that kind of weird market research comes in, when you're like, oh, people who like reading books about this also happen to be into this kind of cheese. You know, it's like,
right.
It's a bit more random than that. And that's why like, the kind of deep dive. But I guess.
Well, I think if the core tenet to what we're trying to do is essentially spread communication, consciousness, and build confidence in people.
Yes.
Then that's it. That's the core tenet. Like, oh, these guys, like NPR is National Public Radio, but for the most part, NPR, it's all about education. Either about the news or just like human interest pieces and things like that. You know what I mean? You're not going to have like a zany slapstick comedy show on NPR for the most part, unless there was some sort of underlying current there that tied it in. So I think if we just focus on finding other similar podcasts that are about spreading communication, consciousness, and confidence,
that's
you know, then how they go about it is sort of that's the salt or the pepper on the meal.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, that's really cool. So, like, what are your next steps? I mean, I know that I need to get a podcast out there, but that is like my sort of January thing. It's like making sure that it launches pretty well. I have my ideas for like actually launching it and get it out there and hope for the best. I might run some Facebook ads, but I'm not gonna like stay up all night thinking about it. But what about you? I guess now is a weird time because it's Christmas and people are like not really doing stuff. But are you people, or what are you thinking?
What people?
Oh,
you mean
like
other
podcasts who might be interested in it. Yeah.
Well, I think what I want to do next is research platforms. Because in order to go to somebody and say, I have this idea, I have to be, and here's where we could put it, you know?
Oh, so what about, right. See, I think that's like quite an easy thing. I would have thought that just sticking up a WordPress site, which I can do very quickly, and then using.
And link to other people's pages? Yeah, absolutely. Like that could be it right there.
Yeah.
But at least, I think there should at least be some, thought put into almost like a mission behind it.
Yeah. Yes.
What do you call it? What is this? You know, like little things like that.
Just like a page, a PDF manifesto about this is what we're trying to do, like sort of mapped out for me. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like trying to make it kind of visual for people to get a better grip. I think people just know. What's that?
I'm just going to Podcast One's website right now. They're one of the larger sort of podcast aggregators that I think of off the top of my head. For one, their web page is not the most attractive, but I mean they're a major podcasting network. So like I just sent you a link.
Oh yeah.
And essentially that's what their things are. You know, if you look at their homepage, I wouldn't really call this and also the other thing is they're not as healthy as they were a few years ago, because now like little things like you have to become a premium member in order to hear more than like the most recent 5 podcasts of a particular podcast. And I was actually like, okay, maybe I will sign up for this. And it was like $20 a month. And I was like, I'm not fucking giving you guys $20 a month just to listen to your programs.
especially when you can still listen to these programs on iTunes for free.
Well, actually, even on iTunes, you can only get the last 5 of the shows that their network. Yeah.
Not all the shows, because they've got like Bulletproof Radio. I'm sure you can listen to all of those.
Oh, okay.
I'm not like convinced. I'm just wondering, maybe they've got their own shows as well, and those are the ones that are limited. I know, I'm just shocked if that's the case. Okay, I'm looking at Gimlet now because model is really like.
I've never actually heard of Gimlet until you said this, so I'm.
Oh, cool. Well, in for a treat. Let me. Oh, I have no idea how to send you a link.
The only Gimlets I know about come with gin or vodka and Rose's lime.
Exactly. That's the other thing. I really loved the name, and so the show that I remember listening to was Startup, and it's just it's about a startup, but it's about how they started Gimlet Media, and it's really great. So anyway, I think the thing that connects all of their shows is just purely entertainment. In my head, like that's what connects them all. Like I can't think of anything else.
They're in Brooklyn.
Very much. Oh, right.
That's big time. Thank you for telling me that. This is like huge for me right now. I'm in Brooklyn.
Yeah. And I think they're doing it perfectly. I do think they're very high, like their shows are very high budget, generally. But yeah, the people who are running it being like, can I pick your brain about this? Because we'd really.
I mean, if you want to reach out to them, feel free. But I could also do that, and because I'm also physically, I could go meet with them.
Yeah. I've gone to like the people page, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, Alex is behind it.
Okay, so how about this?
Yes.
For next steps, why don't I email you some background information about things that I know and understand about broadcasting and radio already? Just because it's like Christmas time, we don't really have to reach out to anybody just yet. This is like
agreed. Yeah.
And you can do the same for me, like Gimlet Media thing. Like I had no idea about this, and where my base of knowledge is more a historian base of knowledge. Like I could tell you all about the way radio started and how it functioned.
And I love that as a starting place, because I don't think a lot of people are making that connection.
No, they're not.
I think there's something quite charming about it. So like, let's go with that. I'd love to know more about it. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll think of, because I've definitely got a few. I think there's another one I've got in mind that's similar. Send that over, see what they're doing, and I'll send you a couple of the shows that I think might be a fit. It just might be interesting to see what you think.
Sure.
And
I'm super open anyway, by the way, when it comes to things like that. Like
I think especially stuff.
No, it's got to fit into this box, because then you're already like, why are you bothering? You're already miserable. It hasn't even started yet.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I would love you to give me feedback on. Just be nice about it. No. I will take criticism very well. But
I thought that your most recent recording sounded good.
It's funny because that was meant to be a book club, but you went like so I'm trying to remember what podcast it was for, but my Mac died one Sunday and I was like going to have my book club that evening, and I was on a podcast and I was like, I'm doing this on my tablet, and I decided just to record the book club rather than deal with the tech of getting everyone on the call. And I think it worked better than actually having a book club. So anyway,
okay,
that was that.
Well, I'll also cue you into a few things that are going on with Breaking Walls right now.
Yeah.
Up until for the most part, so there are 47 episodes so far. I have 2 more that I'm coming out with through the end of the year, and then I want to do something big in the new year for the 50th.
Cool.
You are absolutely correct in that if you want to sustain listenership, you have to put things out on a consorted schedule that people can then, although people don't want to have to tune in when they say, but they want to know that it's there at that time too. They want that comfort. So, and I have noticed that my viewership, I took a few month hiatus from podcasting this summer in order to work on a manuscript. And since I've come back, my listenership has been down, and I'm not really sure what that means. You know, I haven't taken time to really research it, but at the same time, I'm also kind of like, there could be, obviously the fact that people have gotten to the point where like, we don't know when this stuff's coming out, so they stop listening. But also that doesn't factor in like people use Facebook less, and that's my main source of publicizing or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would just put it out there that I do think the iTunes algorithm probably has a lot to do with that. Whatever's going on there, like I just know that with blogging, even taking like a bloody month off can really hurt readership, and it seems so tiny, but yeah, I don't know, but I do think it picks up. Like I remember even moving, and Google, like when I moved my website over, it took bloody months for Google to sort of sort out their algorithm and bump me back up again.
Right.
So what were you saying? You're going to do something special for the 50th?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just like walking through my apartment.
Yeah. Ooh, this is interesting. I'm dizzy.
Sorry about that. I just really needed some water. Well, so rather than just do straight up interviews from now on, like what I did with you, they're great, and I'm not totally like discontinuing that form of show. Yeah. I'm also I added a new subgenre of podcast, and I launched the first kind of one for it with the most recent podcast that I released, which happened to be on the well, it wasn't happened to be. I did this on purpose. But it was the 75th anniversary of the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
So I released a podcast because, as starting the backstory, something like the history of American radio, there are not, by me having grown up collecting these shows, I have like a 10,000 show collection, basically. So, and I have an extensive knowledge of it. That's great. It's fine. It's a hobby, right? Yeah. But unlike, say, baseball, which I also love, there's like a million people who know a lot about baseball. There's a lot less people who know as much as I know about radio. So I was looking at another way to, let's say I have an interview lined up with somebody and it falls through, how else can I produce content? Right. So I said, what if I launched a subgenre, it's called the Radio Chronicles. So once a month I want to release a show. For the first one, I looked at, and if you want to listen to it, it'll be better than me just explaining it, because it also probably will need I'll get better at doing this kind of show as I go forward. But anyway, to make a long story even longer, I basically went back to, because you can find most radio broadcasts like around the internet. So I went from December 7th, 1941 and started to chronologically play radio clips of that day and like of that week. So you're basically going back in time and like taking the temperature of the country and like basically like as the story unfolds. And so I like wove the story in and out as I went. So I'm going to try to do another one about New Year's Eve on the radio. But basically I want to do one a month. That's easy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, in January, Donald Trump is going to be inaugurated as the next president. Yeah. It would make sense to do a Radio Chronicle show dealing with inauguration, you know? Yeah. So like,
oh my God. And there could easily be at least one great theme for every month.
Right. Exactly. There's going to be something, an important date or something in each month. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's one idea. Another idea that I had, and this goes, and it's not really my own idea. It's more like investigative journalism / human interest. NPR does it better than anybody. But I went to see a show last week at BAM, which is the Brooklyn Academy of Music. It's this UK-based troupe called Bittersweet. Mm-hmm. They do Debussy's string quartet in G minor, and they have an audience where they blindfold the participants, and then dancers basically touch them and put scents in their face and like feed them things while they're blindfolded the whole time.
And listening to the music.
And listening to the music, and it corresponds with the emotion behind the music. So I went to the show, and I like got some audio samples of the show. I didn't participate. My friend did, and I just sat and watched in the audience, which was super interesting to see like this going on. But then I interviewed the girl Stephanie, and then I'm going to interview my friend who participated, who also happens to be Stephanie, and I'm going to weave the story in that way, kind of like telling it in as, you know, unfolding a story that way. So basically trying to do 3 different kinds of shows: a straight up interview, more of like an on-site reporting, and then also sort of like a history approach. So I have 3 different kinds of podcasts that I can produce then.
Yes. And it's, I mean, okay, so for me, I got both of the latter two, like that sounds super interesting. I would have thought the curation one, the history one, would be more straightforward and easier to manage. That one where you're going to like, live places, that sounds like a lot of hard work. Like I'm not like
I agree with you.
Work, but it's like if you're trying to it sounds brilliant, especially how interesting that would be. But are you talking like places around you? Is that what you were thinking? Because it'd be a pretty like local thing.
Well, I am going to, in general, I'm beginning to localize what I do a little bit more, because that actually makes me more special. Because now I'm a native New Yorker who understands the culture and history and loves it, and I'm making things for other New Yorkers. Also, living in a city with 9 million people, while I'm localizing, at the same time, I'm lucky that I'm localizing to a group of 9 million, plus New Jersey, and you know, it's not much of a stretch to say that you could generate content and hits and views and dollars locally around the New York market.
And I'd also say that just because it's based in New York, like I would listen to it, like because I'm just interested in places around the world.
People want to know what's going on in New York. It's New York.
100%.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. It just sounds like hard work, but like awesome. So would they sit as different podcasts, or are you thinking it's all going to be under?
Right now, it's all under Breaking Walls.
And then I guess that sounds good, because then you can just get feedback, and if one of them is starting to feel like less fun, then you can drop it if you want. But no, it sounds great, and I'm really looking forward to hearing that history mashup. That sounds crazy. So is there no copyright or anything on those old recordings?
What do you mean?
Do you have
copyright?
Yeah.
Well, that's up in the air. See, everybody who worked on that stuff is dead.
Right, yeah.
And when I was a kid and I first started to get into old-time radio, some of those people were still alive, and let's say in the year 2000 or whatever, and they were like 80, 85. But in the last 15 years, whoever was left is dead now, for the most part. The last 2 people remaining were the guy Hyman Brown that I mentioned to you, and this other guy named Norman Corwin, who was a tremendous writer. Tremendous, like somebody that should be studied and researched for his ability. And he died at like 100, like 5 years ago. Like he lived to be in 2011. He died.
What is his? Sorry, I just want to look up these people. What was his name?
Norman, Norman Corwin, Corwin.
Yeah, and Hyman Brown. Yeah, and do you think that
Hyman is Himan, by the way? Sorry.
Okay, yeah. But would the places that you're getting them from, because I'm just wondering about their estates, like there might be remaining family who are like getting, awesome. I'll look at that.
That's a URL for a site that I pay $10 a month for, like unlimited downloads. I mean, you can basically find most radio broadcasts to listen to free somewhere, but I didn't mind. I've been paying this guy $10 a month for like 10 years now, just because when I first discovered it in college, you know, which also coincided with me, like, for the first time having high-speed internet. And I was like, this is great. I can download all of these, you know.
That's
as far as, you know, so I was looking up, in America, there were 4 major radio stations. Actually, I would absolutely, if I'm going to, like, give you homework, I would recommend actually listening to my most recent podcast, because it's part history lesson in terms of, like, leading up to that December 7th, like the World War II. I'd like spend a couple minutes, but I also quickly talk about very quickly, like the radio landscape then. But at one time, I'll tell the story as quickly as I can. There were 4 major radio networks. NBC had 2 of them, and then there was CBS and another network called the Mutual Broadcasting System. This is America only. NBC had to sell one of their 2 networks. It became ABC because of antitrust monopoly issues. ABC, CBS, and NBC all transitioned to radio. I mean, from radio to television, because their general economic model was a pyramid, top down. Somebody ran it. You know, we could shift this business over to television when it comes about. The Mutual never was able to do that, because even by the name alone, Mutual was made up of there were many affiliates with no main home office, if that makes sense. Even though the NBC had many affiliates, they were still like, all right, well, one guy runs the major company. CBS, William Paley ran CBS. Mutual was essentially a true democracy. So they never had the extra dollars to transition to television when radio market died. But I looked them up because I just like the name, the Mutual Broadcasting System. So, but somebody owns the name still, like somebody who bought them out, you know, retained the name. So things like that might still be under copyright. Now, as far as like shows, I don't mean like specific like scripts. I mean like the show, like Friends is a show.
Yeah.
There was a very famous American radio show called Suspense, which was radio's outstanding theater of thrills. So it was always like mystery or thriller kind of show. And at the time, in the 40s and into the 50s, like Cary Grant was a star. Like every week there was another major like network star who like guest starred amongst the working radio actors. There is a troupe of people who have revived Suspense, and they're like real actors like that. They must have some sort of low-level budget to put this together, but it exists. So like, and nobody's suing them. So because I don't think that anybody who, like, let's say Suspense was owned by CBS because that was the network it ran on. Nobody who's at CBS is looking at this stuff because nobody cares, right? They would only look at it if it turned around and this show Suspense started to make real money, and they realized like, oh, you guys are making money. We just want your money. We don't want the show. We just want your money. You know, like.
Yes, and they'll find a way to get the lawyers involved. And I'm just wondering if you don't have sponsorship. You don't have any sponsors on your podcast.
I don't.
But like, I'm just wondering if that was to happen anywhere down the line, that's the only time I think people would come chasing. So I think it's like. It's interesting to me. Like, I'm quite fascinated in copyright anyway, like the Internet Archive, and just being to get stuff like what, around 70 years.
I think it's 75 years.
Yeah, and I think it varies. I think it's like less in Australia or something ridiculous like that. And it's I love that. I love that, you know, just kind of counting down the years. Like Alice in Wonderland, for example. Like anyone can just create stuff around that because there's copyright on it.
Well, I think the thing with copyrights is, like, let's say the 75 years is up. If you still happen to be alive, or if the entity is still alive, they can just renew the copyright. Then it's another 75 years. It's not like once you create something, it only has a 75-year shelf life before it becomes public domain.
Yeah, it's whatever people can be asked to do, and it just feels like you said, people aren't looking at this stuff. Then probably no one's kind of thinking, can't wait until somebody falls into my trap and
right. And like on this side, you could probably, and in this day and age, if that ever did happen, and we're just speculating about nothing really, but you could fight that in court and be like, these people didn't do anything on this. They sat on it for 70 years. They didn't know it existed until I improved it. And for instance, like old-time American ownership property rights in terms of land was that if you made improvements on something, it became yours. If it was dead, destitute, and you took it and made it better, then it was yours by default, because that's morally, correct.
Looking, because now, like this guy, the RUSC, I mean, he's got shit, like all of those free downloads, that's like a really long page. And I assume if he's giving those for free, they're for everyone. Like, he doesn't have more rights than anyone else.
No.
Gosh, there are so many.
Because here's the other thing. When something like radio died, this was prior to the days where major networks saved all their stuff, right? Everything from reel-to-reel tapes to scripts. That's only, even that's like a very 10, 15, 20-year-old thing, like saving things forever. You know, in terms of like you use reels and things like that. So it's really just like whatever's left, whatever people can find. It's a dead medium.
Yeah.
I recently discovered there was a writer. I have his main old time radio book. His name is John Dunning. He's still alive. He wrote the Encyclopedia of Old Time Radio, and I had the book since I'm a kid. And in it, it's basically like an alphabetizing of every show that has, you know, broadcast dates, sponsorships, you know, times it was on, you know, general cast members and stuff about each show. Depending on how important the show was in the history of radio, it'll get a longer or a shorter passage. But in the forwards of the book, he talks about certain interviews with certain radio people that he had conducted on a show he had in Denver. He had a radio show in Denver in the 80s, talking to old radio actors and things like that who are like in their 60s and 70s at the time. So I was able to find about 15 of these interviews online at different places, which he had the show for years. So we're talking 15 out of like 500. Yeah. And so I was trying to reach out to him, and I was able to get in touch with his wife. And basically he had this massive benign brain tumor about 10 years ago that had to be removed and essentially lobotomized him. And so he's no help anymore. Like,
yeah.
But the thing is that, I guess the overall point is, he was one of my last indirect lifelines with anybody who had a direct lifeline to the genre. So he's, even though he's still alive, he's essentially dead in terms of like his you know, being an active member of anything. I'm looking at, so I have lots of ideas, right? I want to start a broadcasting network because I love broadcasting, and that's part of, it's like ingrained in me to start to figure this out. But there's also like to learn about how to go about it, you got to go back to the beginning, right? You got to listen to the people who did it and then learn from it.
And it's a really great way of going about it, because when we skip the past and we're just going on the back of what we're seeing that's happening right now, we're not going to do the work. You know, like, I think it really helps, whatever you're building, whatever you're creating, to look back and see what was happening, because that's how things go anyway. They do kind of like go in circles. And yeah, I mean, I haven't explored it myself, but I'd be really interested in knowing if there is any podcast doing something similar. Like, I would be surprised if there wasn't.
Serial is one that I can think of, but that's true story.
But even then,
Serial, Serial proves that there's a market for this. People will tune into this stuff.
Yeah, and this is why I think you're gonna love. There's a show on Gimlet called, maybe not, but do you know the Mystery Show?
Mystery Show. I just noticed it.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I don't even think they have very many episodes. I think that's like a great way of. They're not harking back that era. I think there's probably more to be referenced, even from like the little stars. Like, I love that.
Well, this is something simple that also Family Guy, the cartoon Family Guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how popular it is in the UK, but obviously.
Yeah, I fucking love this Family Guy. Yeah, very popular.
Seth MacFarlane grew up listening to old time radio. I know he did, because there are references that he puts in there that most people don't get. Also, all of those Road to Whatever shows, you know, like when him and Brian go on an adventure, those are copies of movies that Bob Hope and Bing Crosby used to make in the 40s, The Road to Something.
And that's very cool.
And the cutaway gag, like where it's like, that's like the time that, you know, how Family Guy does it. That's an old radio and vaudeville trick. Like,
Right.
I happen to know that because I grew up with that stuff. So people
Okay.
will still enjoy that, even if they don't understand the long history of it.
Yes.
So he looked at something and was like, I know I can, it'll work.
Yeah.
You modernize
Right. So
and update it for the time, but the bones are the same.
yeah, he didn't have to do it in a way that's like, you'll like this because it's harking back to this thing. It's like, no, this is just what people have liked then. A lot of them are going to like it now too. And because I don't know enough about his background, but all of the songwriting and stuff like that, the musical element.
That's vaudeville and radio.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. So, well, I'm also going to just be listening to some of these old shows. I mean, the Abbott and Costello show. Surely that would be brilliant.
Some of the comedy, if you want, I can give you recommendations.
Yeah, that would be good because this is quite overwhelming. There's quite a lot. But
I can also tell you the exact show that I'm going to revive when I have a chance to.
Okay,
once I look into the legality of it, but I'm sure I'd be able to, because the other thing about this particular show was that it never, when a show has no sponsorship on radio, it's called sustained. It's sustained.
Okay.
For most of this particular show's run, it was a sustained broadcast, meaning it was like a summer filler for a show, or, you know, we got to fill this time slot so we can revive the show. It's called Escape, designed to free you from the four walls of today for a half hour of high adventure. And the reason I think that could work as a revival is because each episode would be self-contained. Therefore, I could have people call for entries for people to write a script or something. But I also wouldn't have to think like, well, Kat is the star of this drama, so I need Kat every week in order for this drama to be alive.
Again,
you know.
And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get something that you don't have to worry too much about the logistics every week.
Right. I want to make it as free flowing and have as few friction points as possible.
Yeah, and I think for the listener as well, like occasionally, you know, I definitely miss episodes, and my phone is tiny, so like it will only store a certain amount of episodes. So for that to be the option of like, oh, I don't have to listen in an order, I can just dip in and out. I think is good. I think it's good for your audience. So.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, but that is also something like, that's 2017 stuff for me. Like the broadcasting, like how to launch a network, I'm going to go about this immediately because my financial life in some ways dictates that I get off my ass and make this shit happen. But also, it's a passion. Like I want to make it happen. So, and as far as like the radio drama stuff goes, that's like, I'm getting much better at being like, okay, that's a plan and I'll come back to that in February. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
it's funny, I've been just like literally this afternoon planning out my 2017, but trying to focus just on Q1 and then having a list of would like to do these things by the end of the year, but I'm not going to like stress and start making plans for them right now because I've still got 3 months to get. Yeah. No, that's good. Have you set any like other kind of main goals for 2017 or?
Just to be successfully in business for myself and not working in a gray office job.
Yes.
That's
awesome.
like step one.
Yeah.
I have a lot of projects that are like at various stages.
Awesome. That's exciting. Well, yeah, this all sounds really great. And like I said, I'll do my bit over the weekend to.
Okay.
I've kind of given myself the week. What's that?
I'm just gonna like, because this chat that we're in has a a chat bar.
Yeah.
Let me just send you a few links. You know, Wikipedia is a lot better than people think.
It is.
It's not horrendously misinformed anymore.
Yes. I agree. I found out that Alanis Morissette has a podcast the other day.
Oh yeah.
It's just, you know what I mean? Like everyone, but everyone just brings something different. You can never guess what you're going to get. I'm passionate about just the podcasting, the state of podcasting at the moment. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I'll have a look at that. So sorry, just before we go, like, how did you get into it? Was it like handed down from your parents, or like?
Not exactly. My back when, even in the late 90s, people still bought cassettes.
Yeah.
My grandmother, for Christmas in 1999, got my grandfather a box set of Walter Cronkite selects the 60 greatest radio shows of the 20th century for a company called Radio Spirits. And my grandfather was born in 1941, so he grew up with the radio and then television, and he, like, as a kid, he listened to the radio. Yeah. So she got him this box set, and I sat down and started listening to it with him. But there was a particular show called The Shadow, which is like a pretty famous show. There was also comics, and they made a movie with Alec Baldwin in the 90s. But the thing is that Pinky and the Brain, the cartoon, had done this episode a few years before that I had watched called The Mist, where it's a spoof of The Shadow, and he's using the Shadow clouds men's mind with some power he learned in the Orient, so people can't see him. No, where's that coming from? Like he's standing right there, but they can't see him somehow. Okay. And so Pinky was using the mist to try to take over the world, but it was like done in it, like in the episode of Pinky and the Brain, it was the 1930s. Like basically, they were in a radio studio and blah blah blah. Also, you and I have not talked about anything like this ever, but I happen to be a very spiritual person. I grew up Catholic, but I'm not Catholic. I am, but I'm not.
I also grew up Catholic, and I'm not a Catholic anymore.
Okay, so we have that in common.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, this is not the first lifetime that I'm involved in radio, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Just certain, even like that episode of Pinky and the Brain as like a 12-year-old, there was something about it that like spoke to me at that age, which is why I was then interested a year or two later when my grandma got this thing and I like made the connection, and by then I was already like 13, so I was old enough to like appreciate this stuff.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, and that's exciting. Like when you do start noticing those common threads throughout your life, I think a lot of people kind of don't pick up on that stuff, whether it's there or not. So, no, that's cool.
I'm going to send you a link to one of the other thing that with radio drama, and I know where this is a little bit of a tangent because the first step is to launch a broadcasting network.
Behaving yourself?
Is that you?
That was me. Sorry, I was just going to YouTube. The thing that makes radio so successful and it can still work, and the reason why it can still work is because unlike television or a movie, it is the imagination.
Sorry, I was like, YouTube. Sorry, continue.
YouTube, okay, this show that I just sent you, the YouTube, it's an episode of that show, Suspense, from Christmas time in the 40s. Cool. Listen to it. It is one of the, and I'm going to send you another one with Cary Grant, actually.
Cary Grant, yeah. Sorry, what were you saying about podcasting?
Radio has always been called, I don't know if it's generally called this today, but at the time it was called the theater of the mind because it's literally your imagination. So that's another reason why. And look, we're in it. Somebody told me the other day, the phone has taken the place of imagination, and I was like, oh my God, that's very accurate to what I see around me all the time. But people, that's not life. You know what I mean? Like, that's not real. People will go back to doing healthy things if you just lead them there. But the two episodes that I just sent you, I'm sorry to cut you off because I'm doing most of the talking here. Those two episodes are two of the very scariest and best shows that I've ever listened to in my life. That they're scary today. The second one with Cary Grant is called On a Country Road. In particular, there is nothing about it that could not actually happen to anybody. And it's timeless. Okay. It's totally timeless. If you listen to it, it's hysterical, and I don't mean in the funny way. I mean in the like anxious and fear way. And it's amazing.
Yeah, old school hysterical. Yeah. Okay, well, it's nighttime here, so I can't listen to this before bed.
No, I would absolutely not recommend you listening to either one of those before bed because they will screw with you, especially if you're like alone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, what was I saying? Just about podcasts. No, I can't really remember. Whatever we were talking about before. Yeah. No, I've forgotten because I'm so nervous about watching these, listening to these shows.
Well, the first one, The House in Cypress Canyon, you can listen like that. You can listen to late at night. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm talking as a 30-year-old man. I will not listen to On a Country Road alone by myself somewhere at night. It's that terrifying. Like, it's terrifying in a way that's like it could happen to you. Terrifying.
Yeah, a friend of mine, because I think this is the thing. We grew up watching. Well, like I was really into horror films as a kid, but now I'm super sensitive to them because I'm like, well, realistically, like this situation might happen, and yeah, it's I don't know. I think I've just gotten more sensitive to it over the years.
I think that's what, The Shining is one of the scariest movies ever, and most of it is because it's not totally believable, but it's believable enough. It's not a gory horror movie. Yeah. It's more of a mental thriller.
Yeah, 100%. That was my last thought. Sorry, I did remember the idea that like phones and the internet are kind of making us like more distracted and all of these things. I'm probably not the best example for that because I am easily distracted, but there was never, I doubt that there was a time when they created the first book and they were like, well, now the world's gone to shit. Actually, they probably did. That's, I think, what did happen when they came up with like printing and stuff. People got scared. You know, they're like, what's going to happen to humanity? And that's exactly what's happening now. It's just another tool.
Well, it is, and people just have to learn. You know, it's like you get a new toy and you play with it till it's overload, and then it becomes more of a balanced thing in your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There are always going to be scaremongers around people because that's part of the human condition.
Right.
So.
Right. Exactly. So, all right. Well, I'm going to look up Gimlet. Please continue. Let's just keep this open dialogue going.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and I'm going to look up, what I'll do is I'm going to research Gimlet because I'll reach out to them. But first I'll like actually educate myself on what they are. But I'm planning on reaching out to them by like Tuesday of this week.
Awesome. And I'd love to get your feedback on the podcast. I'll send that over.
Send that to me, please. I will absolutely listen.
And I'll let you know what I think about the scary shows.
Yeah, and also just check out the latest episode of Breaking Walls. Even give me feedback on it. I mean,
that I can listen to now.
It might run a little long. You know, it's over an hour.
No, that's brilliant.
But let me know.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And if I don't, oh no, it's not quite getting there yet. But have a very happy Christmas.
Yeah, thank you. You too. We'll talk before then.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.